The year was 1884, when the Arizona Territory still burned wild beneath a pitiless sun. Out there, in a land where mesas tower like broken teeth and coyotes wailed like restless spirits, life was cheap and men gambled daily with death. It was a frontier of cattle barons and drifters, of bullets and whiskey, where a single story could echo louder than church bells across 100 dusty towns. And one such story began on an afternoon when the wind spun dust through the crooked streets of a frontier settlement, carrying fate on its back. That day, the square was filled for an auction. Ranchers, miners, and farmers pressed close together, come to bid on the stock and supplies that fed their lean lives. Horses stamped nervously, wagons rattled, and voices rose in the heat. But it wasn't the livestock that hushed the crowd and set tongues wagging. No, it was a figure standing tethered beside them, something they did not expect, and most could not believe. A woman. She towered above the tallest man there, her frame built with the strength of storms and mountains, shoulders broad, limbs long and powerful. Her hair, a dark river bound in a thick braid, fell straight down her back. Her name, spoken in whispers, was Tyre. She was Apache, though now she stood among strangers, chained like a beast. And the crowd, half stunned, half cruel, reacted as frontier crowds do. Some laughed, some spat, and some stared in silence. Murmurs circled her like vultures. Too big for a wife, a giantess, not even human. But the truth was uglier than the whispers. Hunger had hollowed her people, and when the winter came hard and lean, they made a choice that broke the spirit. They sold her, not to marry, not to labor, but to a butcher, a greasy man with dead eyes, whose trade was slaughter. He meant to carve her as if she were hog or steer, her flesh turned into pies for miners in the hills. The auctioneer's hammer rang, and the butcher's coins clattered into a callous palm. The man grinned at the thought of his profit. "She'll fetch me a fortune in meat," he boasted, loud enough for everyone to hear. The crowd erupted in the kind of laughter that curdles in the gut, low, cruel, and careless. And through it all, Tyre did not break. Her face remained carved of stone, her eyes steady as a desert sky, though deep within them a fire smoldered. Two men dragged her away in chains toward the waiting wagon on the edge of town. She walked without a sound, without struggle, as if her spirit had sunk beyond reach, or perhaps as if she was waiting for something unseen. Folks drifted off, their voices carrying the tale to saloons and bunkhouses alike. All but one man. He stayed, leaning against a post, hat brim shadowing his eyes. He watched. His name was Luke Rollins, a cowboy tempered by hardship. He had seen cattle wars, lynchings, and death enough to harden most men to stone. But the sight of the crowd jeering, the clank of iron on a woman's wrists, struck him deeper than a bullet ever could. Something inside him kindled, something that would not let him walk away. That night, while lanterns in town burned low and the streets fell silent, the butcher camped beyond the outskirts. His fire cracked under the stars. He and his men passed whiskey between them, laughter rising coarse and ugly in the night. Tyre sat apart, bound in the wagon's shadow, her gaze fixed on the horizon as though searching for escape in the cold shine of the stars. It was then the sound of hooves broke the stillness. Slow, steady, deliberate, Luke Rollins emerged from the dark, horse carrying him like a shadow across the sand. He reined in just shy of the firelight, one hand resting easy on his revolver. The butcher narrowed his eyes. "What do you want, cowboy?" he barked. Luke dismounted, boots grinding in the dirt. His words came quiet, but sharp as steel. "I'm here for her. Name your price or face me." The men at the fire shifted uneasy. The butcher laughed at first, a harsh bark that died almost as soon as Luke stepped closer. In the glow of the flames, the cowboy's eyes showed hard and steady, the kind that had stared down death before and did not flinch. The butcher swallowed. He muttered a number, twice what it paid. Without a word, Luke dropped heavy coins into his palm. The weight of silver silenced all further talk. The butcher's pride burned, but the money cooled his courage. Chains fell. Tyre lifted her wrists, rubbing where the iron had cut deep into her skin. She turned to Luke, confusion flickering across her face. A stranger had bought her freedom from the edge of slaughter, and she had no name for him but mystery. He tipped his hat, voice steady, low as a vowel. "You're no animal, not while I draw breath." He mounted up, nodding for her to follow, and together they rode into the desert night, the stars burning white above them like lanterns hung by God himself. Behind them, curses sputtered into the dark from a man too cowardly to follow, his fists clutching coins that could not warm his shame. And so the tale began, of a cowboy and the towering Apache woman whose fate he changed with a single choice, in a land where life was bought and sold, and redemption rode on the back of a horse. Freedom clung to her like something strange, almost forgotten, carried in her chest like a fire she hadn't felt in weeks. For Luke Rollins, the weight inside didn't ease. He knew the kind of man the butcher was. Men like him never let go, never forgave. Somewhere out in the hills a coyote yipped, its cry sharp against the desert silence. Ty rode beside him, tall and silent, her presence as heavy as the stars above. Luke hadn't given her reasons for what he'd done. Maybe he didn't have any to give. But both of them knew well enough. This wasn't the end of trouble. Out here, trouble didn't end. It just waited for its chance. By the time dawn touched the desert, the story had already outrun them. From whiskey-soaked saloons in Tucson to campfires along the Santa Cruz River, whispers spread of the cowboy who'd stolen a giant Apache woman from the butcher's hands. Some claimed Luke had gone mad, throwing away coin and courting death for a woman no man could claim. Others swore he meant to marry her, chasing rumors of hidden tribal gold. But the truth wasn't in the talk. It sat quiet in Luke's chest, a place where words rarely found room. He didn't try to explain himself. He didn't need to. Luke saw something the rest of them never looked for. Maybe it was the way Ty stood tall when the world mocked her. Maybe it was the steady quiet in her eyes, the kind a soul only carries after walking through pain without breaking. The desert doesn't lie. It wears things down until only what's real remains. And Luke Rollins had decided there was something real about her, something no price could measure. But stories like theirs draw hunters. The butcher, furious at losing what he called his fortune, gathered hard men from the border, guns for hire, quick to pull iron and slow to show mercy. He promised them gold if they brought her back. Some said it was revenge. He wanted more than the money. Others said both. Either way, the desert wind soon carried the thunder of hooves behind Luke and Ty wherever they went. One evening, as the sun bled red against the cliffs, they camped under mesquite trees, the fire snapping, the air carrying dust and the sharp tang of juniper smoke. Ty sat quiet in the glow, watching the light fade, while Luke checked his rifle out of habit more than need. That's when he saw them, dark shapes rising on the horizon, gun barrels catching the last of the sun, like sparks flying off hot iron. "Hand her over, cowboy." The butcher's voice cut across the wind, sharp as a whip. "She ain't worth dying for." His men fanned wide, horses restless, guns ready. The desert air turned tight. Holding its breath, Ty's heart pounded like a drum of war. For the first time in her life, someone stood between her and danger. Not to sell her, not to shame her, but to fight for her. The weight of it burned in her throat like something she almost dared call hope. Luke rose slow, boots grinding in the dust, hand resting easy on the Colt at his hip. His voice came calm, flat, steady. "You want her? Then come and take her." The wind carried his words across the fire, dry as leaves. The butcher spat into the dirt and gave the order. A rifle cracked, the bullet kicking dust at Luke's boots. By the time the echo faded, his gun was already out. Fire flashed twice in the twilight. 2 riders thrown from their saddles before their weapons even cleared leather. The rest scattered fast. Men who ride for coin don't ride for death. They broke into the night, leaving the butcher alone, his breath ragged, his hate sharp as a knife. Luke moved his horse forward, slow and steady, eyes burning deep as coals in a stove. His words came low enough to cut worse than shouting. "You come again, you won't ride back." The butcher believed him. He turned and rode into the dark, carrying his anger like a wound that would never heal. The land went quiet again. Weeks slipped by with the kind of silence only the frontier knows, broken only by coyotes, by the sigh of wind through dry grass, by the creak of saddle leather. Luke set to building a cabin at the edge of his cattle range, a place made of cedar logs and stone. a place where no one could ever be bought or sold again. Ty worked beside him, steady hands on the axe, raising walls higher each day. And as the cabin grew, something else began to grow too, something they didn't yet have words for. She picked up his language piece by piece, the way a river carves a canyon, slow but lasting. He learned her song, her old ways, her rituals tied to earth and sky. Sometimes they spoke. Sometimes they let silence say more than words could. The desert doesn't waste what it doesn't need, and neither did they. What grew between them rooted deep, strong as mesquite roots that find hidden water. One evening, with the light turning the mesas to copper, Ty stood in the doorway of their half-built home. She had carried one question with her for weeks, turning it over and over until the words finally came. "Why?" she asked softly, steady as the wind. "Why save me?" The question hung between them like smoke that refused to rise. Luke set down his hammer and looked at her a long moment. His face was rough with trail dust, but his voice carried a softness she didn't expect. "Because you're more than what they see. Because no one should live chained. Because you deserve to be free." It wasn't polished, but it was truth, the kind you could build a life on. For the first time in years, Ty felt her mouth curve into a smile. Small, unsure, but real. The kind that comes when winter finally loosens and you start to believe spring might last. Luke saw it and felt something stir inside him, like a horse turning toward home after a long trail. They didn't speak of it. Some things don't need words. In time, the names that once weighed on her, mocking names, cruel words, began to fade like dust in the wind. The giantess, they used to say. But when riders stopped at their cabin for water or news, they spoke differently. They called her Mrs. Rollins. Some said she married him. Some said he married her. Out here, it didn't matter which way it went. What mattered was this. A woman once sold like an animal now lived free under the wide sky, with a man who saw her worth in a world that never had. And long after the cattle trails closed, long after the railroad carved the frontier into something new, folks still told the story of Luke Rollins and the Apache woman too strong to break, too proud to bow, who outlasted every man that tried to claim her.